We've seen some crazy builds in Diablo 2 history, and today I'm going to show you one of them. Recently on stream, we built what's called a Ranger Paladin, or a Paladin that uses guided arrow and charge. I've seen some people build this in PvM, and while I absolutely hate those builds, when you make this into a PvP character, it's actually surprisingly fun and effective. While the build has some weaknesses, I was actually surprised at how many good matchups it has. And the cool thing about this build is it doesn't rely on any hybrids or bugged items, so you could build this thing on ladder or even Diablo 2 Resurrected when it comes out. The strategy with this guy is you want to run around and keep the distance on your opponents, shoot them with a bow from great distances, name lock them, and then when they choose to come in close, you just charge them down. Some people call this build a Bowadin, but it has a surprisingly wide variety of attacks that it can use. I give this build a 10 out of 10 fun factor score. We built it live on stream, so I just wanted to share what we finally came to for a conclusion for the best items for the build and share them with you guys. That being said, let's dive in to the Ranger Paladin, aka Bowadin build in PvP. You might be wondering what the skill points are going into with this pretty unique build, so let me just dive into that and show you where I statted those. Let's start with the combat skills tab. We are a charger and a Bowadin, so we're gonna wanna max charge and all of its synergies. So you're gonna wanna max charge, vigor, and might first and foremost. After you max those three skills, the next skill you're gonna wanna max is Holy Shield. Not only does this help you get to max block, but it also allows you to do another backup attack, Smite, and it actually increases the amount of damage that Smite does. As far as the offensive auras tab, I would highly suggest maxing Fanaticism. That's the predominant aura that you're going to use. So with that being said, we have 5 skills maxed, which will pretty much max out any build that you have at a high level. At level 99, you'll actually have a couple of skills left over. So let's check out the defensive auras tab. Obviously, we have Vigor maxed for the charge synergy, but the 2 points that I had extra at level 99, I put those points into the resistance auras. As you can see, this guy's resistances absolutely suck. There are some choices that you can make with the items that you wear that can kind of boost those up, but it's always good to have a sort of backup aura to make it so that you don't have to compromise too much damage while still maintaining those good resistances that you're going to need a lot in PvP. That being said, let's segue into the stat points for this guy. These are pretty straightforward. You're just going to want to put enough points into strength to wear all of your items with all of your different setups, which we'll get to in a minute. Enough dexterity for max block, and the rest of your points go into vitality. I'll also draw your attention to the damage for both of the attacks with this guy. First of all, we're shooting a 3.1k guided arrow. That damage alone is pretty comparable to some hybrid Zons out there. It is a little bit less, but when you factor in the point that this guy has, with this setup, 100% deadly strike, this damage is always doubling. So the damage that you see on screen here is a little misleading. This guy is actually doing anywhere from 2k to 6.2k with guided arrow. And then if you factor in any open wounds, crushing blow that you have, the damage just gets unreal pretty quickly. And when we swap weapons here, you can see that with our one-handed charge, we're actually doing 5.5k damage. That is with a Grief Zerker, which I'll show you a bit more in a second. So again, the damage on screen is a little misleading. He does 5.5k with Crushing Blow, Deadly Strike, but additionally, you get that damage boost from Grief, that plus 400 damage, which is a pretty significant amount of damage that does not show up in the character stat screen. Trust me when I say this guy's one-handed charge is vicious. The attack rating is pretty solid, 13k. That will allow you to hit most builds, unless you're going up against a build with very, very high defense. This should be enough attack rating right here to hit just about anything you're going up against. Almost 14k defense, also pretty decent. We have just under 4k life with this setup, which is a pretty healthy life total for PvP. So now with the skill and stat points out of the way, you might be wondering, what is this guy using for items? Let me just dive right into the funnest weapon on this build, which is the bow that he's using. This is a Widowmaker, and it's very important for the build because it gives you +4 to guided arrow. That does not care about the class that you're using. So any character that uses this bow can have access to guided arrow. Also, something that a lot of people don't know about guided arrow is your attack rating doesn't matter. It's a magic arrow that shoots, so it's always hit. Your opponent either blocks it or they don't. Another cool thing about this bow is it actually has 33% deadly strike on it. It's very handy that this bow has 33% deadly strike on it inherently. One thing you might notice about this bow right off is I didn't put a 4015 IAS jewel in it. I actually put a 4014 ED max damage jewel. There is a very good reason as to why I didn't put an IAS jewel in this, even though IAS is pretty crucial to the build. And that reason is that we oftentimes find ourselves using Smite as a backup skill as well. You want to hit your IAS breakpoint regardless of what side of your weapon swap you're on. With this level 27 Fanaticism aura, I can actually hit the maximum breakpoint for IAS with the bow and with Smite, with only 35% additional IAS. So we have Widowmaker on one side of our weapons, but on our weapon swap, we have a Grief Berserker Axe. This item needs no introduction to you D2 fans out there. This thing is just perfect for this build. Some of you might be wondering why we use Spirit Shield with this setup. Trust me, if you don't have a shield like this and you're trying to create distance between you and your opponent with teleport, you're just wasting your time if you're not putting on some amount of faster cast rate. Whereas we know that this guy's resistances suck, it's always good to have a boost. But to go even further, there are so many instances in PvP where you need to have a decent amount of faster hit recovery, and Spirit gives you a huge boost to that. You could also use Hawes, or you could use even a Spirit that has the Knights mod on it as well. That's also a possibility. The Knights mod on a shield, instead of having that inherent 45 to all resistances on it, it has up to 65% enhanced damage and up to 121 attack rating. But Spirit's a pretty busted shield. This is my shield of choice right here. I choose to get my IAS through G-Face typically. There is another helm that we use in the stash, which I'll get to in a moment. This G-Face has a 37% enhanced damage, 15% IAS jewel in it. I get the rest of our needed IAS from High Lord's Wrath. This amulet is very important, and I rarely ever switch it out on the build. Not only does it give us that 20% IAS and +1 to skills, but again, 37% deadly strike is so nasty. With this particular setup, it actually allows us to get 100% deadly strike with this bow and arrow. For the armor, I use Enigma. There is a good reason why I don't use Fortitude for the main setup for this guy. Whereas we're a Ranger Paladin, we want to increase the range that we have on our opponent. Not only does teleport help with that, but also having a high level of faster run walk just helps you move around the map very quickly. I've recently switched to these gloves, Steel Rends. These have 60% enhanced damage, 10% crushing blow, a big bonus to strength, but to be honest, the strength bonus doesn't really matter because by the time you get to the amount of strength needed to wear these things, strength isn't really an issue anyway. As for the rings, I wear one Ravenfrost for the big boost to attack rating, dexterity, and most importantly, the cannot be frozen. You do not want to get frozen on a build like this. The other ring, I just have a max damage, AR, and stat ring, essentially. These rings can get a lot better. I mean, ideally, you could have +9 to minimum damage there, which I think would be a little better. Attack rating, stats, maybe mana, life, and resistances. That would be a pretty solid ring for this build. The belt is Verdungo's huge boost to vitality there. It gives you some serious damage reduction, faster hit recovery. As you know, there's a lot of really good things about this belt. You might have already guessed with our heavy reliance on deadly strike, crushing blow, faster run walk, and open wounds. Gore Riders are definitely the boots of choice. The inventory is pretty unique for a high-level character. You usually only see Zons or Barbs use an inventory like this. We have an inventory full of 3 max AR lifer charms. It's a really good way to boost up not only your life and max damage, but give you that crucial AR that you need sometimes for your charge. Whereas we have charge on one side of our setup and a bow and arrow on the other side, it sort of forces us into having a cube bow setup. In case you're not familiar with that, it's just where you have CTA in a cube, you swap out in field, cast your battle orders, swap back out, and you're ready to go. In PvP these days, you need to be very versatile and have items in your stash for a variety of setups. So let's just check out what this guy's got going on in the stash. To be completely honest, I've found that this helm right here, Crown of Ages, is probably a better helm to use on the build. The +1 to skills not only helps you with your battle orders, so it increases your life a little bit, but it also helps you with the damage from guided arrow. Additionally, as you know, this helm has faster hit recovery on it, damage reduced by, plus to all resistances, and if you find a decent one, it's got 2 open sockets that you can insert 2 of whatever gems you want into it. The versatility and survivability of this helm is so good. I've oftentimes found myself for a lot of matchups switching from G-Face to Crown of Ages. The gloves are actually a hot point of contention, so I do have a few switch-ups in the stash. I love rocking Dracul's Grasp in a lot of duels with this guy. Some people in pub PvP games, though, don't like the fact that it casts Life Tap, so if that's the case, I would definitely suggest having another pair of gloves to switch to. You're definitely going to want to switch away from these if you're doing any team duels with this guy. That's usually pretty heavily discouraged in teams. You can have Trangul's gloves as a swap out for your glove spot here. That will allow you to do some pretty nasty, pretty fast chain locks with Smite. So if you're decent with doing that and you want to hit that 75% faster cast rate breakpoint, Trangul's gloves aren't bad to have in your stash. And additionally, if you want to mess around with the jewels that are in your COA and switch to something totally different, you could make up for the IAS that you lose by switching to 20% IAS, 10% crushing blow gloves. You could also do 20 IAS knockback gloves, which is not a bad idea with the bow and arrow that we're using. Either one is fine. Ideally, they would have stats and resistances on them as well. I do have Fortitude in the stash for the instances where we don't need COA and all we're trying to do is either charge down our opponent or shoot them. We're not really trying to get away from them. This armor right here can allow you to do massive amounts of damage. In certain circumstances, Fortitude is an okay armor to use in PvP for this build. And of course, our resistances suck, so every once in a while we would need to really boost them up without compromising our aura. And in those cases, I use a Kira's Guardian helm, which I've upped here to a diadem, and I also put a 15-15 jewel in it, 15 IAS and 15 to all resistances. Speaking of resistances, there's also these resistance boots that I have in the stash. Again, you know this guy's resistances suck. Sometimes you just need that additional little kick to resistances. No pun intended. You might have noticed this beautiful looking axe right here in the stash. This is actually one of my favorite weapons in this entire build. It's very rare that you get to use it. And just so you know, I could have easily made this video about a charger that does 60k damage with this thing. But I didn't want to mislead you guys and make you think that this build is all about using F-Death Decapitator here, when in reality, you're using it for very, very few matchups. I don't even have battle orders active or anything like that, and look at this, he does 28k damage. Now take into consideration that this weapon has 49% deadly strike on it at level 99 as well. So with this item, in conjunction with High Lord's Wrath and Gores, you actually have 100% deadly strike, even with your safety setup here with COA. This damage is always doubling when you hit your opponent. So with battle orders active and all of that, you can do upwards of 60k damage on the high end with this when you charge somebody. Very, very vicious damage. So those are the items and setups that this guy has. I'm just gonna dive into some duels and show you what this guy looks like on the battlefield. And there it is, a breakdown of the Ranger Paladin. As with any PvP build, your skill level with the character and the skill level of your opponent is going to make the biggest difference as to what your success rate is in duels. We've only been playing this guy a week, and I absolutely love him. I think he has a lot of potential. Some of your harder matchups that you're going to run into at first are probably going to be VTs, Hammerdins, and Barbs, but some of the surprisingly good matchups are Assassins and Amazons, which are extremely vicious in your typical PvP arena. Again, it really just depends on your skill level with the build. The more you practice with it, the more answers you'll find that you have. Some tricks that you'll want to be familiar with in PvP are upcharging and upsmiting with this build. Be on the lookout for a PvP tips and tricks video to come. But that's it for the Ranger Paladin. Hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as we enjoyed playing this and making this from scratch. Looking forward to catching the next one and maybe trying this build out in Diablo 2 Resurrected when it drops. Hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. I'll catch you in the next one.